the statement he has made with regards to World Environment Day. Mr. Speaker, as you know, you have granted me the opportunity to convene the Climate Change Caucus within the Senate, and it is one caucus that draws membership in a bipartisan manner. Mr. Speaker, World Environment Day fell on Monday, as has been communicated by the chair, and the caucus had made certain arrangements to do tree planting around Uhuru Park. Mr. Speaker, we did not execute because one of our main partners, the United Nations Environment Programme, had expressed their willingness to support us in that activity. Mr. Speaker, we decided to postpone our tree planting activity to afford the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme an opportunity to come to the Senate to meet the Speaker and to meet with other members of the Senate, because we think that a partnership between the Senate and UNEP is one that would be mutually beneficial, considering that the UNEP is headquartered here in Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the caucus, we shall be communicating the new date on which we as members of parliament can join the global effort towards combating climate change through planting of trees and through elimination of waste plastic. Mr. Speaker, this year's theme was around plastic, and there are important and interesting innovations that we have come across as a caucus. Ghana is proposing at the United Nations a global plastic pollution fee, and that will be levied on some of the big users of plastic, people like Coca-Cola, the global beverage manufacturers. And in as much as Kenya has gone for the ban on single-use plastic, there are other innovations that we can consider, like imposing higher levies. Mr. Speaker, I would be happy if we're increasing the taxes on producers of plastic, which then end up choking the environment. Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to, with your permission, to encourage that when African leaders meet in Nairobi in September, under the leadership of William Ruto as the chair of the Climate Change Committee of the Africa Union, that we as members of parliament should not be left behind. That as the presidents have a conversation on climate action, ministers have a conversation, we as legislators should also ensure that our voices are heard. This week, the United Nations Habitat Conference is going on, and we've been very lucky, Mr. Speaker, to get invitations. In fact, this afternoon, Senator Muma and Senator Hamida had already registered to represent the Senate at the UN Habitat, but it is the death, untimely death of our staff, Madam, Mr. Speaker, I could never get to call her anything beside Abujubu, and that's how I always used to call her. And it is that news that pulled Senator Hamida and Senator Muma out of the UN Habitat meeting. So I just wanted to encourage that when the world converges in Africa later on in September, that members of parliament should also be involved. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage multilateralism. The Paris Agreement is an important tool for multilateral action around climate-related causes. Mr. Speaker, we know that when the President was opening the UN Habitat Conference, he made certain critical remarks about the processes that go about the Paris Agreement. I do not want to believe that the President might be directing us towards a withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, which is part of national laws because it has been ratified and domesticated in Kenya. I want to encourage that even as we approach multilateralism, even as we go into this conference of parties under the Paris Agreement, COP28 or COP29, we don't go as beggars, and we don't go with an inferior attitude or with an inferiority complex. I want to believe that that is what the President has been calling out, that when we go for COPs, when we go for global climate meetings, we should not go as beggars on our knees and with a begging bowl, because after all, the impacts of climate change are devastating upon us, and the people to blame are the same people who want to give us aid and who want to give us conditions and who want to put us as small beggars in light of those Paris Agreement and multilateral arrangements. So, Mr. Speaker, we should never pull out of those multilateral arrangements like the US did during the time of Donald Trump. And the President, I hope, will still encourage Kenya to be part of future COPs, because that is where decisions are made in a multilateral manner that can help us to combat the global climate challenges. Mr. Speaker,
What is your point of information? And Senator Kajwang, would you wish to be informed?
Yes, Senator Mungatana, I accept.
No, Mr. Speaker, just to allay the fears of my colleague, Senator Kajwang, the President is not pulling us away from COP 20, is it 28? Yes. The President addressed this issue when he was addressing the climate change conference in Midrand, South Africa, and addressing the whole of the Pan-African Parliament. And he said specifically, because there's a thinking among some African nations that let us not attend Paris, let us frustrate Paris. That is a COP that the Honorable Kajwang is talking about. But there is another thinking that says, let us be felt at every meeting on climate change. So I wanted to inform my learned friend and my colleague here that the President of Kenya stated very clearly that we must be present in every meeting so that our position as Africa is felt and even country position. So Kenya will very much be there. I wanted to allay those fears.